Welcome back. This is lecture 6 of Beauty and the Beast, and this will be the final lecture. So, I'm happy you stayed along the whole way, and, well, if you haven't began watching and you're watching this on YouTube, then click above to watch the first lecture. But let's pick up where we left off and let's finish off this movie, in the best way possible. This is the point where everything comes together. This is the full unity of, well, they do a good job in essentially saying everything. So, the point where we left off is really simple, right? It's the unity between something like, well, it's the dance, right? And the dance is really, the dance is really more for the Beast than it is for Belle, right? Because it really shows that he's a human, right? It really shows that he has this human, divine aspect to him, something that transcends the prince. And it really shows his transformation. In terms of Belle, it's more of just we could say it's more of like a symbol of commitment, right? To be able to, choose this person to dance with. It's like, okay, there's something there, but it's really more for the Beast. And, well, now we get to sort of like the final part. This is the final part, and this is mostly for the hero, right? This is mostly going to be for the Beast, but At this point, we could finally agree that the heroine and the hero are completely intertwined, right? They are now essentially one, and everything that the Beast does, sort of the hero does too. Everything that Belle sort of does too. So, what happens is I've sort of been neglecting this throughout the entire movie, but I wanted to put it all at one time. So, the sort of backtrack here is that right here we have Gaston and we have his little humble servant here, and that what he decides to do is he decides to take Maurice, right? I'm pretty sure his name is Maurice. We'll assume that the father's name is Maurice. I'm almost positive on that. But what he does is he says, okay, take me to Belle, right? Gaston says this to Maurice, and then Maurice says something like, I would never let you marry Belle, right? Like, if clearly you're not the right guy, I don't want you to marry Belle. And then, okay, yes, his name is Maurice. So then what Gaston does is he right now ties him up to a tree and says the words, if Maurice won't give me his blessing, then he is in my way. And this is the perfect way of, first of all, developing the plot, and second of all, understanding Gaston, right? Because the question is, what is Maurice to Gaston? And the answer is, he's a tool, right? If we're getting back to the narrow view of the world in which the prince used to see, we could say that Maurice was a tool to get to Belle, right? And the unfortunate reality is, once you stop becoming a tool, then most likely you're going to be an obstacle. And that's something that Jordan Peterson really explored. But it's a really strong idea, right? It's a really strong idea. I remember as I was listening to his lectures, there was something that dawned upon me. I was walking through the grocery store, and there was a ladder, and it was in the middle of the aisle, and I wanted to get through the aisle. And I asked myself the question. I go, okay, what is this ladder? And somebody could say it's a ladder. But for me, I said, no, it's not a ladder. I never looked at it as something that I could climb upon. I didn't really think about climbing the ladder in the grocery store. The thing that I saw it as was an obstacle in my way to get through the aisle, right? So the reality is when I sort of made my depiction of the world, I didn't even see it as for its functional use. All I saw it was, okay, this might be a tool for somebody else, but I don't really think about that. All I think of it is an obstacle that is in my way, an obstacle that, well, has nothing to do with the fact that it's a ladder. All I care about is the fact that it's in my way. And that's essentially what Gaston is thinking right here. So that's why he ties up Maurice, and that's why he kind of, getting back to it, that's why he symbolizes what the Beast was when he was a prince, only looking at the world in terms of tools and obstacles. So what happens is Belle looks through the magic mirror and she says, okay, First of all, the best part is she's given full access to the West Wing and therefore can look through the magic mirror, which means that, she's opened him up, and that's the symbolism of the dance. But she goes through the West Wing and she goes with the beast, and she sees that her father's in some sort of turmoil. So she says to go back, and here's, we'll say, one of the most powerful points that I've seen across movies. It's this idea of possession. It's this strong idea of possession. So what happens in The Actual Beauty and the Beast? The beast decides he's going to let her go, right? She was technically a slave this whole time, and he really relied on her, right? Because it's really smart, right? It's really smart to be possessive over her, logically, right? Well, one aspect of logic, you could say. It would be really smart to say, no, you're my slave, you can't leave, you're a tool, and you're going to stay here. It would be so simple for him to go and do that. And because technically at this point she's still a slave, and he decides to let her free. And the idea there is, it's confusing. It's really confusing because I don't know how to think about it. And I'll tell you why I've been struggling with this. And this is probably something that really bothers me. So, in our culture, right, we have this idea. Well, first of all, so this idea here, right, where the beast tries to leave, it's anti-possession, right? He says, I'm not going to possess you. You could be free on your own terms. You could follow your own heart and follow your own goals, and I'll always be here, something like that. And so therefore we have something in this culture that runs opposite to that. And this idea is called marriage, right? Because what is marriage? Marriage is the simple idea that I take you and you take me for the rest of our lives, and it's almost as if like you could just simply take that idea and turn it on its head and say, well, if we're committing to each other for the rest of our lives, then you're my possession, and I'm your possession for the rest of eternity. Right? Because really, isn't that what it is? Isn't that what marriage is? Aren't you really saying, okay, we are going to be together, and you can't leave me? Right? That's anti-beast right here, because the beast is saying you're allowed to leave, but what marriage is saying is you can't leave. We're stuck in this together, and we're going to do it. And I don't know what to think about that. Because really, here's the unfortunate reality, and here's something that, well, Disney probably won't want to tell you, but something that I think is really important, Humans have a natural desire, and this is beyond supported by the psychology. We have a natural desire to have sex with multiple people, right? And have relationships with multiple people. And the idea that we don't, right? And first of all, the idea that you could possess somebody is saying, regardless of this instinct, regardless of this desire that you have to be with someone else, you're mine. You're mine. And that's quite unfortunate. That's quite unfortunate because one of the things that really scares me, right? And this is one of the things that obviously as someone who's not married and as someone who's sitting on the outside of marriage, I think everybody sits here and looks. We're like, okay, wait a second. Why is it that a little less than 50% of marriages get divorced? And then why is it that 56% of men cheat on their wives, 49% of wives cheat on their husbands, and and there was this great, crazy stat that there was this one lawyer who he was a divorce lawyer, and he managed over 7,000 cases. And he said early on in his lawyer career, he found out that one of the main causes of divorce was the, quote, other man and other woman. And in every divorce, what he'd do is he'd ask the couple, he said, is there another man or is there another woman? What is really happening here? And He said after 7,000 cases, he has found 4 cases in which there was no other man or other woman. 4 divorce cases out of 7,000. And he said in the last, I think it was 20 years, he hasn't had one. He says he's always searching for the 5th, but he can never find it. And that's just something that really scares me. It says, okay, we have this individual natural impulse for, we'll say, love with multiple people, right? Like you can look at it as something as shallow as something like an animalistic impulse to have sex with multiple people. But I think of it as an impulse to life, an impulse to be with other people, and an impulse to connect with other people. That's another way of looking at it. Both are right and both are wrong. Because you can look at it from both perspectives and you're not wrong. But let's assume in this case that this is something like an impulse to life. And when you see something like that, marriage, possession, is designed to squander that and say, okay, you have this desire, it doesn't matter, we've made a commitment and we're set together. And in the case of Beauty and the Beast, what you're really saying is you can't leave, you can't go. And I don't know how to feel about that. One thing that I really wanted to bring up on this exact topic is this idea in Star Wars, right? This idea is perfectly mirrored in Star Wars. So what we have right here is, it doesn't even matter if you don't like Star Wars, don't worry, but we have something like the Beast, who's the good representation. He's the guy who decides to let go. In Star Wars, you have Anakin Skywalker, who ends up becoming Darth Vader. I'll give all the backstory, because I'm pretty sure that the people who like Beauty and the Beast are probably not the people who like Star Wars. But anyways, I'll give you the full backstory. So what you have is Anakin Skywalker is the person who turns into Darth Vader. I think that's something that you don't really need, right? So Anakin Skywalker is the hero, and eventually he turns to the dark side, right? And the reason why he turns to the dark side is because of possession. So this is what he does when he tells Natalie Portman, I forget what her character's name is, but he says to her, when he's sort of like professing his love for her, he says, I'm in agony. The thought of not being with you, I can't breathe. And well, what he's really showing is, I want you, but I also need you, and I can't be without you, and therefore I need to possess you, right? That's the idea that he's really putting forth here. And well, that's the thing that we'll say turns him to the dark side. That's the thing that kills him. And the advice that he gets from Yoda, and Yoda's like I think everybody knows Yoda, but he's like the all-wise figure. He's like something like God, or something like the divine presence on the world, or the divine presence within him. What he says is, and this is the way to really tie the two movies together, he says, attachment leads to jealousy, the shadow of greed, that is. And then he gives him the advice, train yourself to let go. So let's kind of break that down a little bit. So he says, attachment leads to jealousy. It's like, definitely, right? Whenever you become too attached, too possessed, you become jealous, you become possessive, right, over the other person. And he says, the shadow of greed, that is, or if you want to reword the sentence, you could say, that is the shadow of greed. Jealousy is the shadow of greed. And what he's really saying is something like possession, something like too much attachment, right? Like making someone your slave in the case of the Beast is greedy, because you're looking at them as a tool. That's the problem. You're looking at them as somebody that only serves you, right? You're looking at them as someone, they only serve you, and they only have, we'll say, connection to you. They can't have connection to anybody else. They can't. Yeah, that's good. So now that's why I think when he decides to let her go, right, in the Beauty and the Beast story, and that's exactly what Yoda says, right? Train yourself to let go, and that's what the Beast does. When the Beast decides to let go, what he's doing here is he's seeing her for her humanity. He's saying, wait a second, you are not just a tool that serves me. You're not just a tool that serves my need for, we'll say, love. We'll go with love in this case because we haven't even gotten to the sexual aspect. So we'll say, you have served my need for love. You have served my basic human need for love. But your humanity supersedes that. I see you as a human more than I see you as a person who fulfills my needs. I see you as a human more than I see you as a tool. And when he tells Belle that you can leave, he's really saying, you're a human to me. And I'm willing to forego my self-interest to serve your humanity. And this is what you see when you're in a really, really good relationship. And I don't mean this in an intimate relationship. I mean this in just a good relationship with your best friend, with your family, with your friends, whatever. You know, what happens when you're in a really good relationship is their needs are sort of embodied within you, right? Because you could just say that you're a figure of need and you're a figure of self-interest. But really, if you want to have a friend, and if you do have a friend, then you're fulfilling their needs as well as them fulfilling yours. And whenever you decide to make a decision, right, their needs are also being taken into account. And if you don't do that, then you won't have any friends. But what you're really doing here is you're saying, my self-interest lies within your self-interest, and we could sort of work together to achieve a harmonious relationship, whatever that is. And sometimes I'm going to lose my own personal self-interest in favor for your self-interest. But because I see you as a human, because my needs and your needs are almost intertwined when we're together in the relationship, then I'm willing to forgo my own self-interest. I don't see you as a tool anymore. And that's a really strong idea. So getting back to the marriage idea, I just, it seems to me that a monogamous relationship is inherently possessive. And this could really tie it all together, because whenever you decide, and this is why in the Jedi Order, in the Star Wars universe, Jedis are not allowed to get married, and I think that's the reason why. It's because when you decide to get into a, we'll say, monogamous relationship that spans for too long, spans for forever, then at some point you lose the choice, right? Because really, let's say I decide to get into a monogamous relationship with somebody right now. It's like, if both of us choose that, then that's okay, right? Then that's not really a problem, because, well, it's as if we both had the choice to get into a monogamous relationship, and then we both said yes, and therefore that's really it. But some point along that time, some point along the forever, or until death do us part, along that marriage vow, one of the two people, or both of the people, are going to, we'll say, not want that monogamous relationship. There's going to be a part of them that wants to break off. There's going to be a part of them that wants to have the impulse to love someone else. And the problem with these long-term monogamous relationships, and let me clarify, so that means I think maybe the long-term monogamous relationships, not the regular monogamous relationships. The long-term monogamous relationships, it seems almost as if their choice has been squandered. They say, okay, because I am now a possession of the other person, because we are now maybe possessions of each other or possessions of the relationship, then I'm not allowed to leave, and I'm stuck. And even though I have this natural impulse to love, I have this natural impulse to be with somebody else, I can't. So that's why maybe I won't even go as so far to say that long-term monogamous relationships are bad. I'll say they are possessive, and as a result, you can take with that what you will. So the beast decides to let her go. And yes, right, this means that he's not self-interested anymore. His needs and her needs are almost intertwined, and he has recognized her humanity. So Belle comes back, and she finds that Gaston has decided to, here's just a bunch of plot points. He decides to essentially gaslight Maurice and just say, you're crazy. All the things that you thought you saw, they're completely wrong. Don't even think that you're right, and you're going to some mental institution. So he does that. Belle comes in to save her, and he says, lock her up too. She's an obstacle now too, so I really don't want to deal with it. And now we get to the real point, right? Now we get to the just beautiful nature of the movie. Like, I think this is why I was drawn to it so much. It's such a powerful moment here where the beast has to fight Gaston. And the way I like to phrase it, and I know I've phrased it before, but I like to think of this as the potential Gaston versus Gaston. That's a good way of looking at it. So you have Gaston, who's Gaston, and you have potential Gaston facing Gaston. And when I say potential Gaston, I mean the person who could have been Gaston. You imagine the prince all the way back here, right in the beginning of this movie. There are two paths where he could have gone. We'll think of like the Robert Frost poem, right? I went in a wood. Oh my God, why am I forgetting it? There were two roads in a wood, and I took the road. I took the path less traveled by, and that has made all the difference, right? So think about that. You have something like path A that he could have gone on was the path of Gaston. He could have remained the prince forever. And then path B is, well, Beauty and the Beast, right? Becoming a beast, then eventually becoming a prince again, and becoming a good prince. And so what is he doing here? Right? So we'll say potential Gaston is going to be path A, and Beast is going to be path B. Hero is going to be path B. And what he does when he's fighting Gaston, and I think this is the perfect view of the hero myth, is you're fighting off path B, right? So he kills Gaston, right? Jesus, like look, he's choking him right here, and yeah, he eventually dies. So what does it mean when Gaston dies and the beast is the one to kill him? What it means is that path A dies. Potential Gaston, right? The Gaston within him, the evil, self-interested person who only sees the world as tools, the person that he once was, is now dead within him. And he was the one to kill, and the beast was the one to kill him. So therefore, he is officially chosen path B, and this is something that we saw throughout Belle, right? I explained the same idea with Belle with the idea of Pan, right? Where she says, I can't go back to my childhood. I can't be Peter Pan anymore. I can't be all potential. I need to go on a path. And this is just the moment where the beast does the same thing that Belle has previously did. And I think one of the things that you've probably noticed throughout this entire story is that the hero's journey and the heroine's journey are very, very similar. Like, they go through the same psychological processes. And, well, there's something to be said about that. It's as almost if you could extract the hero and the heroine ideas and then say, now we have understood the underlying human framework for how to develop yourself. And, well, that's pretty useful, right? That's really, really useful. And I think Joseph Campbell did a pretty good job when he brought in something like the hero's journey, because the hero's journey is just a really concise framework. It definitely could be expanded upon, but I think it's a really concise framework for, okay, this is the fundamental way that humans grow. And well, that's why I think we watch movies, right? That's why we watch movies in the first place. It's like, okay, I don't know, I'm a 15-year-old boy, let's say, who really doesn't know what I want to do in life or who I want to be. Now I just watched Iron Man, I just watched, I don't know, Batman, and I just watched all these different hero movies. It's like, before I was clueless, before I had no idea who I wanted to be, now I know what I'm supposed to be. Now I have an ideal. Now I have somebody that I can emulate. And, well, that's why we have hero stories in the first place. So, it's like, okay, we got that. So now let's get to the end. And the end is just traditional hero idea, right? So what happens is the beast dies. Why does the beast die? The beast dies because he is no longer, let's bring it back up to here, he is no longer inadequate. He is now adequate. So he has shed off the idea of the beast. So we'll say he went from the prince, right? Somebody who was, we'll say, ignorant and spoiled, to a beast, which is somebody who has completely transcended the ordinary reality, but was inadequate in that ordinary reality, right? And now, because he is adequate in that non-ordinary reality, he sheds his idea of the beast. Very simple. So he dies, and then he resurrects as a prince, right? He resurrects in the same body that he was in before, just more developed. And there you go. So they kiss, and it's all well and good. So now we could say, okay, he resurrects. What happens after the resurrection in the hero's journey? The transformation. And here is the fundamental point. Here is the thing that we've been building up to this entire time. And here it is. What does he do? He hugs. So the tools, the little personalities within himself, they transform back into humans, and he hugs them. He unites with them, and he sees them as people. That's the meaning. That's the final, we'll say, transformation within this story. The clock and the clock and the lamp and Mrs. Potts and all of these characters, Chip, all of these characters, instead of becoming tools, instead of becoming objects in which he could use his self-interest, they manifest, we'll say, they were objects that he could use for his own self-interest to him, right? That's what they were. They were literally, they manifested themselves as tools. Now he finally sees them for their humanity. And that transformation is a completely internal transformation. It's all about how he sees the world. So before he saw them as tools, now he sees them as people. And so that's the tools way of looking at it. The second way of looking at it is a way that is a little bit more profound. So we got to get to the personalities idea. So the personalities idea is that, Mrs. Potts was the wisdom within him, and Lumiere was the order within him, and they were dissociated from his personality. And that's why, as a prince, he was a completely inadequate, we'll say, spoiled prick. That's the way they depicted him. Now, well, we could say, okay, so he was a spoiled prick, and he was completely dissociated from his personalities. By the time that he became a beast, the only thing that he did was realize and become conscious of the fact that he was dissociated from his personalities. What is the meaning of them uniting, of them coming together? The idea is a really, really beautiful idea. It's something like they become integrated within him. they become a part of him, and they develop, right? They completely, they go from little insignificant antiques on his shelf to parts of him. And it's a really, really strong idea, you know. Well, I'll explain it in the framework of a different movie, and this movie is a movie that I'm sure you've heard of, and this is a movie that everybody's heard of. It's not Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, right? The Wizard of Oz. What is The Wizard of Oz fundamentally? You have, well, it's personalities, right? It's the same exact idea. You take a young girl who needs to mature, and she goes down into her own psyche, right? The entire movie's a dream, and she finds all these personalities. She finds all these characters, right? You have Courage, and you have Scarecrow, and you have, you know, all of these characters represent something. And then finally they unite together, and she does some sort of act at the end, right? The hero's act, or yeah, it's a hero story, so it's a hero's act where she embodies courage, right? She embodies, what was the Scarecrow again? Fear? I'm not sure, but she embodies all of them, and they become part of her. I think this is a universal idea, and this is really the best way of conceptualizing it, because it's so relevant. It's so true in your own life. Like, really think about it. Whenever you read a book, right? We'll go with a book, for an example. Whenever you read a book, let's say you read, what books do I have here? We'll go with this book. This is a really great book. So whenever I read this book, right, it's called Animal Farm by George Orwell. Great book, okay? It's as if, well, what am I hoping by this? I'm hoping that I could extract the information from this book, right, that was once dissociated from me. It once wasn't part of my consciousness, but I'm going to take this information and I'm going to integrate it into my model of the world, and I'm going to integrate it into my knowledge base, right? So we'll take that step by step. Take the information, I read it, I integrate it into my knowledge base, and then hopefully it updates my model of the world. Very simple idea. The next step after model of the world is, you could say, and this is more of a spiritual idea, but the idea is something like, I could integrate the spirit of Animal Farm into my personality. I could integrate, so the idea behind Animal Farm is something like, be cautious of dictatorship within a community, right? This is how dictatorships develop. Well, hopefully, if I'm reading it correctly, then when I'm informed, and I think that this is a book that is worthwhile, and so long as I think this book is worthwhile, I integrate this cautiousness into my personality. So not only does it update my model of the world, right? That's one step. The next step is it operates the, we'll say, personalities that I exhibit. It changes the way in which I behave. And because really, if it changes your model of the world, it only does a little bit. It only changes your perception. It doesn't change the actual action that you take in the world, and that's something that we've established. Your action is something that matters. And, well, if it changes your model of the world, hopefully, and if you're doing it right, then it's changing your action. It becomes part of your personalities and strengthens, we'll say, the personality of cautiousness, or something more like vigilance. Vigilance is probably better. And, well, that's exactly what this is doing. And hopefully, you know, this is something that I hope you take from this lecture, right? That's exactly what you're doing in this lecture. You're taking the raw information that I give you, and you're, first of all, ingesting it, then thinking about it, then saying, okay, I'm hopefully going to look at the world from a less self-interested viewpoint, and, well, whatever you want to take out of this. And then hopefully you're going to say, this is going to help my behavior. This is going to influence my personality. And that's exactly what the Beast does here. And that's exactly what this represents. He hugs the personalities, and finally he takes these personalities. He takes the order, right, and Lumiere, which is something like passion, and the wisdom of Mrs. Potts, and he integrates them into himself. So now, if you were to describe the reborn prince, you would say he's somebody who's orderly, somebody who's passionate, somebody who's wise, somebody who blah, 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 and has all the characteristics, has all the personalities of these previously dissociated personalities. So that's the meaning of that, and I think that's a really great way to end it, right? That's a really great way to end it. Hopefully, at the end of this lecture, you have taken the knowledge that I've given you, updated your model of the world, and hopefully it's given you some sort of influence on your behavior and therefore some sort of influence on the personalities that you exhibit in the world. Some sort of influence on, maybe from a more basic sense, the characteristics that you embody. Because, well, the prince in this case is chosen to embody something that resembles a humanistic view of the world, as well as all of the positive personalities that the antiques had exhibited. So I guess that is the end. So thank you for coming along for Beauty and the Beast, and also I hope you read my book. This book is a book that I published very recently, and it's called Break Your Bad Habits in 150 Pages, A Hero's Journey. And, well, this is the exact idea. I took all the ideas from these movies, and I essentially boiled them down into a book. And I explained to you, if you're struggling with bad habits, if you're struggling with any sort of, we'll say, self-control problem, then I hope that you could find my book in the link below and read it if you're interested in my ideas. So thank you, and thank you for watching Beauty and the Beast.